All right, welcome back, everybody, to season 3 of Lessons from Terrible Students. As always, we are the Terrible Students. My name is Jeremy. With me, as always, is Sarah. Sarah, say hello.
Hello, everybody. Happy New Year.
Woohoo! If you're with us on our YouTube channel, we also have another person here with us. But as always, we're going to make them wait to introduce themselves. So you will find out who they are in just a little bit. But first, let's get the fun stuff out of the way. As always, this podcast is brought to you by Lumius. At Lumius, we are your partner in learning. So, as I said, if you're with us on our YouTube channel, you can see that we've got somebody with us. I'm going to let him introduce himself because he comes with a pretty prestigious pedigree, and I'm excited to have him on here with us. So, if you don't mind, Don, if you don't mind introducing yourself and kind of giving us your background, and then we'll go into why we are pretty stoked to have you joining us on this first episode of this season.
Thank you, Jeremy. Nice to be here with you, Sarah and Jeremy. It's wonderful. Great way to start off the new year. My name is Dr. Don Azevedo. I'm a clinical psychologist in Apex, North Carolina. I have been doing corporate consultation for leaders and organizations, particularly teams, boardrooms, that kind of stuff for 25 years. And I've been a clinical psychologist for 33. I've been in the Army and done it there. I have been in corporations. I have built companies and sold companies. And now I am in the peaceful place of just doing my own thing.
Isn't that the dream?
It is the dream. It is
right
lovely.
there, right?
That is. I love talking to people about their relationships, about how to be in relationship with others, how to be present and mindful of it, and how to lead from the inside out.
Awesome. And that is why we're glad to have you. And that's a fantastic transition, because in season 3 of Lessons from Terrible Students, what we're going to try to do is lean more into the leadership side of learning and development, the leadership side of training, and kind of go into more of how, from a learning and development side, we should be looking at leadership and how leaders can help their teams develop, but also how corporations should be looking at developing their leaders. So kind of both sides of that leadership training piece, not only how individual leaders should be looking to improve their own skills and grow as themselves, but how they should also in turn be looking to grow their teams. So that's kind of our overall direction for this season. Now, as far as the direction for this episode itself, what we wanted to talk about for this episode was something that I have seen personally. And as always, we do like to start out with kind of a personal anecdote that usually kind of embarrasses myself or Sarah, mostly myself, to be completely honest. But I've always been what we call an individual contributor, or somebody that is not a people leader. I like to say that is by choice, but who knows? So primarily, I have worked for pretty good managers, supervisors, depending on what level of the business that I've been in. But each one, as they do, have their own kind of leadership styles. From what I say is from the outside looking in, I've kind of noticed that there's, at a very high level, there's two kind of leadership styles for me. There's the first leadership style is kind of that leader that really digs in and does a lot of things themselves. They like to be really in the minutia of it. They really like to do everything. They know how to do everything. They make sure everything is done. If there's something that needs done, they're the ones to do it. And they're really highly respected by their team, which, all of this seems great until you realize they're working 13, 14, 15-hour days. It took me a while to really realize the downside of this. Like I said, I'm on the outside looking in, right? So when I was a younger guy is when I was working for people like this primarily. I'm like, man, these people are great. Like, they're making my job so much easier. Like, I'm actually able to get off on time because this person is helping me out and working till 8 and 9 o'clock at night. But it didn't click in my head that, wow, these guys, I'm not the only person on their team. So it's not just when he's helping me that he's working till 8, 9 o'clock at night. It's when he's helping anybody on his team. So he's working every day until 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, which is not sustainable and not feasible in the long run as far as I'm concerned. But then there's the other side of that coin. There's the person that doesn't do any of that kind of delegates everything off of their plate, that I don't want to say doesn't do anything, because obviously they're doing something and they've done something to get to where they are. And they've done something to be able to retain the role that they're in. But from the outside looking in, from the individual contributor standpoint, they're not doing enough that I'm noticing the effort that they're putting in, I guess would be the best way to say it right there. I don't see that they're doing as much as I am. And from the individual contributor standpoint, that looks negatively to me, I guess is the nice way to put that, right? So that's kind of what we want to discuss on this episode, and why we wanted to have Don come on and talk to us, because he's got that kind of leadership perspective from the inside where Sarah and I necessarily don't. So like I said, I've worked for both of these types, so I'm just going to kind of comment from my personal experience of working from these folks. But so Don, a lot of what I've got a bunch of questions I want to ask of you, but the first thing right off the bat is, do you kind of agree with this generalization? I guess I should say, like, did I sum it up well there, I guess?
Well, it's general enough not to be able to refute.
Hey, that's my goal.
And yes, it does kind of cover the largest picture. There are subcategories of all of these as well. But just for a second, Sarah, Jeremy, when you think about the worst leader you've ever worked for, give me 3 adjectives that described that person.
Ooh, that's dangerous. That's dangerous.
Okay, family friendly. Okay.
Unself-aware. Is that yeah?
That's good. We'll take it. You can make up words.
Yeah, I'm making up words.
Do it.
I don't know. Passive aggressive.
All right. One more. Come on.
Lazy.
Excellent. Thank you, Jeremy.
Okay. Now I want you to remember, Don, you asked for this, but here we go. Loud, racist hillbilly.
There you go.
Yeah.
So
That's a pretty bad boss, Jeremy.
Sure. So Sarah, you were describing the person who delegates too much, who is kind of absent and takes it out on his people or her people if things don't get done. And Jeremy, you were talking about someone who both is not engaged and also doesn't delegate too much, just yells and screams.
that is correct.
Okay. That is not leadership. That is just acting out, right? Leadership begins from the inside out. So first you have to lead yourself. You have to understand your own strengths, your own capabilities, your own weaknesses. You have to know your behavior and be mindful of the effect of that behavior on others. You have to become self-aware, right? And your behavior will have different effects on different people. I was working in a corporation and I happened to be the project lead on a major learning and development piece. And I had several team meetings, right, for several months. And I'd come into this team. The team had been together for a while. I came into this team kind of new, jump into leadership position, leading these meetings. Apparently, I had a habit that I was not aware of at the time. I have a large vocabulary. I've spent a lot of time building a large vocabulary because I love words. I think words are magic. They create the world around you, however you describe it. Well, apparently, I used a lot of words that people didn't know. And so all of them brought in and hid underneath the table a Webster's dictionary. And the first time in this team meeting that I used a word no one knew, they pulled out the dictionary, slapped it on the table, and started leafing through it. It was hilarious. It was absolutely hilarious. And then from that on, they just said Webster. They didn't bring the dictionary anymore. Although I did encourage them to go look it up afterwards and really think about how they could use it, because they could build their vocabulary too. So, I mean, and that's an example, though, of not being aware of the effect that you're having on a team. Leaders need to be aware. They need to watch the effect they're having. If they want a great team that's going to do great work, then they have to be aware of their negative effects on others, whether they intend it or not, and their positive effects, and do more of the things that bring the best out of the people that they have. You know, people are not perfect, nor are they complete. They can't do everything in all ways. Find what the person does well and build on that. You know, a lot of times, most of us grew up, and certainly I'm way older than you all. I grew up in a thing where you had to work on your weaknesses, right? Everyone ignored your strengths and wanted you to work on your weaknesses. Well, the reality is, if I'm weak in an area, the likelihood of me improving it is small, and the amount of effort required to improve it is great. If I recognize the weakness and I partner with others who are strong in those areas, and I build on my strengths, we together will build way more than I ever could by trying to build on my weaknesses.
Now that's an epiphany moment for me, because you're right. That's what they, like, you just upturned all of like traditional learning in like 10 seconds. That's crazy. Like, that's what they always tell you to work on, and what they always bring, like, what is your goals? What do you want to work on? And all this kind of stuff. It's always like, my one thought is, okay, what do I not do well? And never, it's like, what do I do well that I can do better? That's never where my mind goes.
Well, that's a huge question on interviews, right? Like, what would you say your weakness is? Or even things that we're kind of forced to ask ourselves that question constantly, and ask other people that question. If you're a leader, right? So it's completely turning it upside down. And it makes a lot of sense. People aren't going to be experts in everything. You shouldn't have to be, right? Let people build on their strengths. I like it.
Yeah. What do you say in that question? All right, sorry. Tangent. I never know what to say. What is your greatest weakness? What do you say? I always feel like that's a loaded question.
Trick question
in an interview. Like, I don't know.
My weakness is that I am too much of a perfectionist. I'm just obviously loaded with sarcasm, but that's one of like the a way to answer that question. People think that they're
no joke. I always say that I'm always too early for everything, because honestly, I've come to see that as a weakness. I'm always 30 minutes early for everything, and it drives my wife crazy. So I've come to view that as a weakness, but I know it's the same type of answer that you're talking about, right? Like, it's a quote unquote.
I'm on time way too often. Yeah. People hate me. People hate me for it.
But it's not. It's like, it's a question designed not to get an honest answer. But sorry, Don, we run off on tangents.
Yeah. Although you can, if you stop and think, there are things that you don't do very well. I mean, I'm a clinical psychologist, right? Psychologists are known for doing psychological testing. That's kind of our big thing. I'm great at doing the testing. I'm horrible at writing it up, because it's not interesting to me at that point. Yeah. I found what I needed to find. I want to go on and do the treatment. I'm not really interested in writing this long report that explains each of the tests and what reliability and validity is. And, so I don't do psychological testing because of that. I won't do the write-up. It'll be late. I'll annoy other people. So I just don't do it.
There you go. So
that's awesome, though. Sorry, I was just saying that's self-awareness at its finest. Like, I know I'm not going to do this well. I'm not going to enjoy it. It doesn't bring me joy. I'm not interested. I love that.
And I don't remember
It's
what episode
not
it
going to
was.
add value to the other people who are asking
Right.
this of me.
Exactly.
Right. And it doesn't define me as a psychologist. That's the other part. I have accepted that being a psychologist is more than just doing psychological testing.
Yep.
Right. Because we're also taught that if we have a weakness, somehow we are deficient. We are bad.
Yes.
And that's not true.
Yep.
There are more languages that the three of us don't speak than there are that we do speak. Does that make us bad?
Yep.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Only if we're in a country that doesn't speak English. And then maybe we're just bad off. We're not bad.
Yeah. That's it. Yes. Bad off.
And I do want to, so here's my question, and kind of, and we've talked about self-awareness before, right? And how we all want to believe we have this higher level of self-awareness. But in truth, in reality, more than likely we don't, because we see ourselves through a certain lens, and that lens is not the lens that other people see us through. So everybody, and I don't remember the study that I read this on, and you may be able to enlighten this more on this, but everybody sees us through a different lens. So like Sarah sees me through a coworker lens, right? So the way that she sees me is different than the way that my wife sees me or the way that my daughter sees me. So there's different ways that people view me. So how I view myself and the awareness that I have of myself is different than everybody else. So as a leader, how do I attain the level of self-awareness that I need to say, okay, here's where that level I need to start delegating at. Like, here's where I need to start to say, okay, I'm taking on too much, or I'm not taking on enough. Where do I need to start? Because that's where it needs to start, is where are my limits as a leader? And then I can start delegating from there and determining what to delegate. We'll get into that in a little bit and discuss that. But how, as a leader, would I even begin to start to think, where do I need to draw the line, for lack of a better term?
That's an excellent question. And it really begins with clarity about what you want to accomplish. So if I'm a leader downstream in a larger organization, what is my organization supposed to deliver? What are our mandates? Large picture, and then specifically for this year, because often, like you guys do learning and development, but this year you might be focused on a particular topic or a particular company that you're developing stuff for. So what am I trying to accomplish? How clear am I on that? Then what parts of this do I do pretty well and I could do myself? And what parts of this do my team do very well that I can hand off? There's another side too. If I'm running this team, I'm doing a whole bunch of administrative stuff, right? All the HR stuff, all the, thinking about what the growth pattern is of these people. So I need to think about each of my people and what tasks that need to be accomplished this year I can give to which people to help them grow because they're really good at something. So I want to highlight that. That takes time and intentionality. This is not a thing that you can do in 30 minutes. It's not a thing you do once and you're done. This is the part in leadership that most people really get angry at me about because you need to do this all the time.
Mm.
You need to be observant because, stuff changes, right? An event happens and all of a sudden we're shifted in this direction. We get a new client and now we've got to divide the team and restructure what we were doing. All kinds. Somebody gets sick, and is out. Somebody has a family member who's sick and they're out, and we have to change all of those things. So you have to be mindful all of the time.
Right.
You need to be clear on the outcomes, on the resources that are available, and what the timeline is. When you're clear about those things, then you can decide, here are things I need to do. Here are things I'm going to hand off to person A, B, C, D, and E. And here's how I'm going to check in on them. Right? That's kind of the big picture. So how do you do that? You schedule time to do it. And then when that time comes up, you actually do that and you protect that time. You also schedule time for self-reflection. So when I was, one of the things I've done in my life is build companies and lead people, right? So I built a company, it made revenues. I hoped to get it high enough so that I could sell it and move on. Life was good. To do that though, I had to stop. And on Fridays, I would take time in the morning, about an hour, sometimes 2 hours, and think about what were all of my interactions this week. How did people respond to me? Who has moved farther away from me? Who has come closer? How do I understand the effect I've been having on these people? Not that I am the 100% reason why any of those things are happening. They have lives, they have their own stuff. But I need to be aware, have I been short with them? Have I paid enough attention? Have I given them enough room? Am I overbearing or micromanaging? Or am I not giving enough instruction? What am I doing that's contributing to their success or to their failure at the different tasks that they need to do? That takes time, though, and you have to do it consistently. And for me, I had to write notes. I mean, I had to sit down and think about each of the people on my team. How are they doing? What's going on? What have been the interactions? How have those gone? What do I want to do next? So that I had a plan for what I was going to do starting Monday. Right.
I have a question just real quick about that. How, as far as, being aware of these things in yourself and your team, what are your thoughts on soliciting feedback from your team to aid that process? Like, how important is it? How often? What are your thoughts there?
He said yes.
You need feedback. You need to have people letting you know. So you need to be open to that. How can you demonstrate that you're open? Someone gives you feedback and you don't like it, right?
Yeah.
Because your intent was one thing and their experience of it was a complete other thing, right? So you have to take a deep breath and say, they're not accusing you. You're not a bad person. What they're giving you is a gift of the unintended effect that you've had on that person. We all love to measure ourselves by intent, but I'm a good person.
Right.
I'm a good leader. I don't know why you're having such difficulties. Let that go. It's not your intent. It's your effect.
Yeah.
That's a really good way to say it. We measure ourselves by our intent, or what was, like that.
That's it.
Well, yeah,
I think that's
nobody
Go ahead,
sees
Jeremy.
themselves as the villain of their own story, right? Like in our minds, we're all the good guy.
Yeah, but that's
so
why is because people are measuring themselves by their intent. Never thought about that before, right? Like we're all good people. If we're doing that, like but I think that's one of the biggest reasons people are not as self-aware as they think they are, because they do have good intentions, but actions speak louder. Behavior speaks louder.
One of my sayings, now this is trademarked, so you guys have got to pay attention to trademark. Behavior is truth. It's not trademarked. I wish it was.
It is now.
But it's not.
You heard it. It is trademarked right now. Mark it.
But behavior is truth. Think about it in all the relationships that you have ever had in your life.
100%.
What did you track? What people said or what they did?
Yep.
Yeah. And think about that when you're raising your children. Think about that when you're leading a team. What you do is the truth. What you say is noise.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's, I was discussing this with somebody and they said it was an offensive kind of comparison but that's kind of where my mind goes. Cause like I said, I haven't been a people leader. But I do have a 12-year-old daughter. Right. So that's the only experience that I have. And, I have a 12-year-old daughter that is bless her heart, as stubborn and as hard headed as I am. So it's a trial some days. So that's the only experience I have. So when I talk about these topics, that's what I draw from, because that's the experience I have. But so when I discuss this with folks, and a couple of people said that it's offensive because I'm talking about dealing with real people, and I'm like, well, that's why I clarified that this is just my opinion, and I have no background in this, but you did ask my opinion after all. But it is the corollary there, because I try to, if I tell her that I'm going to do something, that I'm going to do it. Like I don't tell her something that I don't intend to do to begin with. And that's how I've tried to raise her, and that's always how I've tried to bend, because I don't want to be that parent where if I say yes, we might do that, then she knows it's a no. Like I don't want to be that parent, because I've seen memes about that parent. I don't want to be that guy.
Sure.
So
I think
yeah, absolutely.
It's the
Go
same,
ahead,
right? I was just going to say, if people you mentioned they think it's offensive when you compare that with like parenting because it's a child. Is that why, Jeremy?
Yeah, and I guess I get it, because I mean, it's different when you're leading a team of adults than
no, it's
parenting.
not.
I was just gonna, I don't know about that. I think a lot of people take this unself-awareness as a child into adulthood. Like, unless somebody has given you tools to do the work on yourself and become self-aware, you're going to live your whole life judging your or basing your awareness on your intent, like I think that sticks with people. And even when somebody brings it to your attention, that you've got to dig deep. That's like you said, that's not something that you do overnight. It's difficult to become self-aware. And I feel like it's not that different from being a child and versus adult. Yes, children and adults, we learn differently and technically, right? But I think those things can consistently stay with you, those behaviors.
Sure. Well, and also think of the power differential, right?
Yeah.
As a parent, you control lots of things for your kid.
That's true.
Right. Your daughter doesn't drive yet, so she can't drive away. She doesn't earn money, so she can't go find another place to live. When you're an employee, you really don't get to determine what your jobs are, which projects you get to be on. You need the money, so you can't speak up and say, this is not good or this is wrong. And if you have a manager who's not going to be paying attention to their effect on the team, you get even more silent and withdrawn. You might look for other work, but that's, that takes a little bit of time. And some people don't even feel free to look for other work. So they are in this power relationship that silences them. That's the last thing you want to do as a leader.
Yeah.
Right? If you don't hear the voice of all the people that are there, you're in trouble, because problems will happen on a project that you will be unaware of because they won't tell you.
100%. They don't trust you.
When I think the key thing you said earlier was to make time to actually do these things. And I want to go back and I want to touch on a couple of things you said, because you've hit a couple of core HR policies. So I've been in L&D for about 10 years now, and there's a couple of core tenets in performance management that you touched on, right? One of the biggest ones, and I had to bite my tongue to make not to make a comment about it, because I agree 100% with you, which is why I wanted to make the comment when you said it. But performance management is, okay, in January and February, let's make 4 goals for the calendar year of whatever year that we're in. And then those goals are pretty much set in stone for the rest of the calendar year.
Yeah.
And then however you do on those, regardless of what happens in the company, it doesn't matter what you go through. It doesn't matter what the company goes through. It doesn't matter what your team goes through. You're going to be judged on these 4 goals at the end of the year. And I think that comes from, I started my career as a field service technician, as an installation technician for an ISP. I was installing cable. It made sense then because the job didn't change. cable is cable, as we said, right? Like we're always going to be installing cable. It is what it is. But when I moved into the corporate world, I was surprised that they kind of locked you into these goals for 365 days, essentially. And that didn't change because, like, to me, it almost changed project to project. Like these goals could change. So I was glad to hear you say that. So I wanted to expand a little bit more on that type of thing and how to kind of change that mindset, because I do feel like a lot of leaders, they'll bring you in, and this time of year, right? Like that, for those in the background, it's beginning of the year, and it's January. A lot of these performance management conversations are starting to happen behind the scenes, where you're setting your annual goals, or your SMART goals or whatever. And I feel like everybody hates doing these because it's so hard to come up with a goal to lock yourself in for the entire year.
Yes.
So, and you touched on that you have to be able to adapt those goals. So if you don't mind going into a little bit more, how do you as the leader become aware of when to change these goals?
So number one, you listen to your people. So the person has the goal, they're in charge of that goal. You're tracking some behaviors, but when you have your periodic talks, whether they're scheduled or they happen to happen, right? Check in on them. Where are you on your goals? What's going on? What do you need to facilitate getting those goals met? Have you met that goal? Right? Get them to reflect on it and bring it back to you. I love it when someone comes back to me and say, hey, my goal was to do this. So of course I have run mental health clinics. One of the things that has to happen is filing of insurance. Mm-hmm. The filing of insurance needs to happen on a timely basis. You can't file the insurance unless the note is done. Right. So clinicians have to finish the note. Then the admin staff has to file the insurance. We had a timeline for those things. You had 7 days that the note would be finished and another 7 days. So 14 days total from the time of the appointment to the time filing happened. Goal was notes are done same day, filing is done within 24 hours. That's the goal, right? How are you working toward that? And now it's a team goal, right? Because the clinician has to do a part and the admin has to do a part. How well are they working together to accomplish that? Which people are they working better with? Which are they not? How are they solving those problems? I had an admin that was doing great as soon as their part was 24 hours from the time the note was done.
Right. And
they were 100%. Problem was, clinician wasn't getting notes done for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month. Really bad. So now you have to talk about, I have one person achieving that goal and the other person not. How do I reward the person who is, and how do I help the person who's not hit the goal better, right? But that takes being aware of it. And the only way you can be aware of it is if people bring you the information. It's their goal, right? So I want them to come to me and say, hey, I'm hitting my goal. Here's the problem I have. Right? As an admin, I can't tell anything to a doc. As a doc and an owner, I need you to run that interference. Right? So that's one way. The other way is be observant. How are people doing? Are we hitting our timelines on different projects? We have milestones. Sarah, you're a project manager, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know all about milestones and all about
yes,
deliverables.
I dream about milestones.
And I'm sure you got a T-shirt that says "Professional Cat Herder," right?
Yes. I actually wrote a blog with a very similar title one time.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm sure, because that's exactly what it's like for every project manager. But get the data, look for data, look for feedback, look for things people say. Hey, I now have a sub goal because I need to develop this skill in order to get over here. Be aware of that. So get feedback. This is feedback. Be willing to break HR rules and say, this goal is complete. I have the data for that, and I'm setting new goals, whether it's in the system or not. I have these new goals, and I'll comment on it. Almost every HR process that does this assessment has free-form areas. This person not only achieved these things, but achieved those things. Don't be tied to the performance cycle HR tool. It's a great starting point, but it's not the ending point. Your job as a leader is to develop the people under you and to develop yourself. So that means you need to be aware of what am I doing, right? And what do I need my boss to give me so that I can continue to develop? There is a wonderful rule of thumb when you're a leader of saying a third of your job should be what your boss does. Another third of your job should be what your job is. And the last third of your job, you should be delegating to others to prepare them to take your job.
In a perfect world.
Sure.
Yeah.
And
that's the right way.
Even if it's not, it's the right way. And it doesn't even have to be perfect. It just has to be aware of. If you strove for doing even close to that.
Yeah.
You know,
be in a better place for sure.
Sure.
Yeah. Leadership.
And in order to do that, you have to lead yourself, which means you have to manage time. So many leaders misunderstand the idea of an open door policy. Open door doesn't mean constant.
Right.
It means that you're available. So if you set office hours, hey, I'm available for folks to schedule from 10 o'clock to noon, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and from 2 o'clock to 4 on Tuesday and Thursday, right? Schedule into my thing. You get 30 minutes. When you schedule, you have to tell me what's the question you want me to answer and prepare yourself to deliver that message and for us to come to a solution within 30 minutes. That is open door.
Yeah.
And it requires people to take personal responsibility. And if you don't have a question to ask me, don't come in my door.
Yeah.
I have work to do.
That's
a good point because, and I have a tendency to play devil's advocate a little bit. So my first thought was like, as if I'm the leader and I've got all these other responsibilities, like how do I manage that time if I have, because it does, again, this is from the outside in, but a lot of these things seem to come in waves, right? Like some big event is happening at the company or some big project is going on. So it does seem these things come in all at the same time. So how do you, from a leadership perspective, manage multiple members of your team all having issues at the same time? But you answered my question before I could even ask it. Man, you're good. Let me tell you.
Well, this is a lot of experience, a lot of reading, and a lot of actual applied mindfulness.
Yeah. What
works and what doesn't.
Well, I'm just thinking about all the instances, right, where in different leaders I've had in the past and their kind of, open door policy and how sometimes that does get in the way because if you make yourself too available to everybody all the time, your day isn't structured, your time management is horrible. Then you are then taking that on because then you're there working 13 hours. It's like it's a ripple effect, right? If you will.
Yes. Yes. It's a ripple effect.
We were just talking about that. But how important that one little thing is, just managing your time, setting boundaries. And of course there's going to be one-off situations. If your person needs you and it's an emergency, absolutely. Right. There's circumstances that require that, but, I've had leaders that have been too available, and then that has been detrimental to their ability to be a healthy leader and a good leader.
Yes, absolutely. And you make a good point. There are emergencies. There are times when you have to break the rules. Rules are in place so that you know when to break them, right? It's not that you never break a rule. They're just there so that you know when to break them.
Yeah.
But you have to define what is an emergency.
Sure. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you have to do that beforehand. I almost use one of those big words that I get in trouble for. So if you define that beforehand and you help people understand, I hired you because you are competent. So first, try to answer this question yourself. Try to deal with this problem yourself. Take the risk. I'm going to back you. If it goes badly, we'll deal with whatever goes badly. At least you took the shot, right? If you absolutely have no clue of where to start to get that done, now we're into an emergency. If it's something that is going to be bigger than your mandate, right? Now we have an emergency. You bring that to me immediately. But I want those to be very small. I really want those to be critical. And I want folks to think first, could I answer this question for myself? Could I make this decision for myself? And everybody's terrified of that only because they get punished if it doesn't go well. Now, that's the worst thing a leader can do, is punish someone for making a decision that doesn't go well. Right?
Yeah. I was just thinking, Don, I don't think I've ever had a leader say, I trust you to make it this decision, make the call on your own. And if it's not the right call, that is okay. Like Jeremy and I did a podcast one about failing forward and how companies say often like, no, failure's great. We learn through failure. Corporate hot take, right? But it's not true, right? They are still punishing their people for failing or making a bad decision, or whatever that looks like. For me, it was really hard. I still have a lot of doubt in myself sometimes because I didn't have a leader to empower me to make decisions, right? And be okay with, if it's not the right one, that's all right. We'll work through it together. I have your back 100%. So, and I've had good leaders, but few and far in between that really set you up to know that, like, I trust you to make this decision. Try it on your own, right? Try to build the confidence. So
go ahead, Sarah. I'm sorry.
I was just thinking about the ripple effect, right? Creating the boundaries and like by doing these little things, you're also empowering your people in other ways.
Right. You're calling out their competence.
Yeah.
And you're reinforcing their strength of sense of self because they are competent to do this. It might be brand new, but they're competent to do this. This is the number one job of a parent.
Yeah.
Is to call out the competence in their kid.
That's true.
To teach them how to decide, because they are going to decide whether you want it or not. And they will be far away from you when they're making this decision. Maybe not when they're 6, but certainly by the time they're 12, and definitely by the time they're 18.
Yep. So
and if you don't teach them, go ahead.
Yeah. That actually does lead me into another point I wanted to get into. So when you are delegating, and I wanted to ask you this because we're getting a bit long in the episode, so I wanted to make sure we hit this point. When as a leader, when you're delegating, you have the option of actually who to delegate these tasks to. So let's say I'm the leader, I have a new task that I have, and I've got 2 choices of who to delegate this task to. So I've got choice A, who could use this task to grow, but I'm not quite sure that they would be able to complete this task successfully. We'll say like a 60-40 shot that they'll be able to complete this task successfully, right? But then I've got employee B, who I know would knock this thing out of the park, but it may overflow their plate a little bit. They're already kind of busy because I've delegated so much to them already because they are such a rock star employee, right? So me as the people leader, I now have the choice, and this is a relatively important project. So now do I overburden B, even though I know that this is important and I know they're going to do it right, or do I take this relatively important project and give it to A with the chance that it might fail? Like that's the type of decision that I think a lot of leaders would struggle with.
All right, Jeremy. So the very first thing I'd say is don't fall for the binary definition. It will either succeed or fail, right? Because that's what gets you frayed and gives it to the person that's already overburdened. Okay. So don't fall for that. Think about, all right, it's a 60-40 split. So it's not like this is a absolute definite failure. This person doesn't know anything about this. This person has a potential for it. So what's the outcome that I want from what I'm delegating? How clearly can I state that? How clearly can I state, here's the timeline in which this needs to happen? And then what resources will increase the probability of this person succeeding, which might be access to person B, and telling person B, hey, you're not doing this one, but this person might need some help in these areas. I'd like for you to make time available from time to time for them to do this. And I would set up the same thing. If they're going to take your time, they first have to tell you what's the question they need answered, the problem they're facing, and be ready to present data to you in a clear, concise manner so that you can help them efficiently, right? So what tools do I give them? What resources do I give them? How clear do I make the timeline? And how clear do I make the outcome? The other part is don't lose touch. So stay with them and say, how are you doing? What do you think? What's going well? What's not? How are you using your resources? Right? So if I give this to person A and I find out, let's say 3 weeks into this, they have never even chatted with person B, right? I'm going to be questioning, how come you're not using the resources around you? Right? You don't have to do this alone. We're not in school where you can't copy off someone else's paper.
Right.
Yeah.
I want you to copy off other people's paper. I want you to work as a team to accomplish the task. And you'll still get full credit because you're leading this. You're just using your resources well. And I want to reinforce that. If they have talked to person B and they've used their time respectfully, right, given them the question, presented the data tightly, that kind of stuff, I want to praise that and lift that up and say, yes, this is the way to work with all the members of your team. This is how you need to work when you're an expert in this area or some other area and someone comes to you, right? All of this takes thoughtfulness, intentionality, and then mindfulness about what's happening on a day-to-day basis, right?
Yeah. See, this is exactly why we needed somebody with your kind of background on, because for me, it's just from our point of view, it's, hey, it's your project, run with it, like do what you need to do and go. And yes, I've had those conversations of, okay, this person's available, but a lot of it is exactly what you said. It's, for me, it's pride. It's I don't want to have to reach out unless it's absolutely necessary. Things like that I have had to get over in my career. And quite frankly, I've been absolutely torched by in the past. And unfortunately, that's what it takes a lot of times, is for a project to blow up in your face where you're like, man, I should have used the resources that they told me I could have used before this thing got to the point where it's at. So
this is partly because American society, I'll only speak for American society, has fallen for the lie of rugged individualism. I'm a self-made man.
Yep.
Well,
Right.
that's BS.
Right.
No one is.
No one.
Right?
Yep.
No one is. I get entrepreneurs who will be screaming at me about how they did it all themselves, right? They built this company, and I said, well, hang on a second. Before you even started the company, there was a road that led to your building. There was a building that you could rent. There was water. There was electricity. There was a fire department that would come if it lit on fire. There were police that kept it safe. There was a parking lot for you to put your car and it be safe. Seems to me like there were a lot of other people supporting you that you didn't even think about, much less your employees who executed against whatever your plans were.
Ding,
Right?
ding, ding.
Or your spouse that was home taking care of the things you couldn't get to because you were so busy doing this other stuff. No one does anything alone. And we reward people as if they did, particularly CEOs and the top level of executives. We reward them as if they did all of it. They did an important part, and they do deserve to get paid well. And they deserve to have the humility to say, if it weren't for the 100,000, 10,000, 50,000 people who actually executed against my dream, my vision, my idea, I would not be here.
Right.
Humility is what we don't have, right?
That's
and we don't
problem.
And we don't have the ability to lift up other people because we're afraid if we lift them up, that pushes us down.
I hate that.
Fear drives this. Right?
Yeah. Come in contact with that quite. That's another leadership, or even just not even leadership, a colleague, right? Anything, just it is the fear of not feeling like you're shining as bright as you could or you should.
Yeah. Well, it does. It comes from that fear of being seen as less than, right? Like I had to get over, and Sarah and I have talked about this on other episodes, where it's like fear of acknowledging where I've made a mistake. And it took me a while to feel like I was in an environment and safe to be like, oh man, that was my mistake. Like I messed that up. I missed that. I did not follow up on that. That's my bad. To where I can say that, yes, that's my mistake. I did that wrong. But now it's like, yes, that was my mistake. Here's what I have done to rectify that mistake. Here's what I will be doing forward to now not make that mistake again. And here's like I do the best not to make the same mistake twice, if I can help it. So but I think a lot of time our knee jerk reaction is just, wasn't my fault.
Right. Deflect. I've had leaders tell me that I apologize too much or I own too much. And for me, probably I have done that in the past, taken on more of the blame than I should have. But this was also coming from a leader who never acknowledged or took responsibility for anything that they did wrong. Right. So they were so far on the end of this spectrum, and I was probably way too far on this end. But that created for me for a long time. Even now, I'm probably triggered a little bit too quickly by people who don't take ownership. You know?
So this is one of the keys. If you want to become a great leader, even if it is of just yourself and your family, your partner, your children, if you have them, even if it's just that, you're an individual contributor in the corporate world, first, take personal responsibility for all of the outcomes you get in your life.
Yeah.
Right? Everything. People can do bad stuff. How you respond to it, though, is your choice. Take personal responsibility.
Yeah.
Right? Then watch for the effect of your behavior on others and adjust as necessary. Right?
That's fantastic. I think that is a good spot to leave there. What I want to do now, Don, I want to give you a couple of minutes. Is there anything that you want to plug, the tag? If you've got any thing that you want to advertise, I did want to give you a couple minutes to kind of speak. If not, no biggie. I just wanted to make sure I give you some time to give any last minute thoughts or anything like that.
Sure. Well, so I run a company called Azevedo Family Psychology. It is what it says, me doing family psychology. My expertise is in marital therapy and helping marriages grow. My tagline is create a life worth celebrating. So if you need help there in your family, in your relationship, just in yourself and thinking about how I can become a better person, come see me, Azevedo Family Psychology. The other thing that I do is I am a voiceover artist. I do voiceovers for commercials and for long form narrative. You can find me at Bear Cave Audio.
BearCaveAudio.com.
I was just thinking earlier, you have a fantastic voice for this. That's funny.
You do. And we were always looking for voiceover folks. So
that's right.
I am happy to do it.
Awesome.
Well, and,
All right.
and I have a company that does also post-production and all of that for podcasts and everything else if you need someone to do that work.
Yep. Sarah, write it down. Put it on the list.
I'm writing all of this down.
As always, thanks everybody for listening. We appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.
Excellent.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you, Don.